The humiliation, the crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the prestigious Serena Hotel ballroom as Karachi's elite mingled in their designer attire. Mira Qadri moved silently between the tables, her black uniform, helping her blend into the background as she had learned to do so well. The charity gala for Digital Dreams Foundation was in full swing, with tech mogul Rafiq Hassan holding court at the center of it all. Amira balanced a tray of champagne flutes carefully, her eyes scanning the room not just for thirsty guests, but for opportunities. Few people knew that beneath her humble exterior, she harbored the sharp instincts of an investigative journalist. This wasn't just a job, it was her cover.
"The waiter girl over here," a voice boomed across the room.
Rafiq Hassan, the 35-year-old founder of Tech Vision Solutions, snapped his fingers impatiently. His perfectly styled hair and expensive suit couldn't mask the entitled arrogance that seemed to radiate from him. "Bring those drinks quickly. Some of us actually have important conversations to finish." Amira approached his table where several prominent businessmen sat, their conversation peppered with talk of offshore accounts and tax shelters. She'd been hoping to get close enough to overhear more details. She leaned forward to place the champagne glasses on the table. One of the men gestured wildly while speaking, accidentally bumping into her arm. The tray tilted. Champagne splashed across Rafiq's pristine white shirt and designer blazer. The golden liquid dripped onto his Italian leather shoes as silence fell over the immediate area. "You clumsy fool," Rafiq exploded, jumping to his feet. His voice carried across the ballroom, causing heads to turn and phones to emerge from pockets. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? It's probably more than you make in a year." Amira's cheeks burned with embarrassment as she grabbed napkins from nearby tables. "Sir, I'm so sorry. It was an accident." "An accident?" Rafiq's laugh was cold and cruel. "Look at you. No wonder you're serving drinks instead of doing something useful with your life. People like you will never amount to anything because you can't even handle the simplest tasks." The crowd had gathered now, some openly filming with their phones, while others whispered among themselves. Social media notifications were already pinging as the footage began spreading online. Rafiq seemed to feed off the attention, his voice growing louder and more vicious. "This is exactly what's wrong with the service industry in this country," continued, addressing the crowd as much as Amira. "No standards, no accountability. Just incompetent people who think showing up is enough." He turned back to her, his eyes cold. "You should be grateful I don't have you fired immediately. Though honestly, what other options do people like you have?" Amira stood frozen, the soggy napkins in her hands, as laughter rippled through the crowd. She felt the familiar weight of judgment, the assumption that because she wore a server's uniform, she was somehow lesser. But beneath the humiliation, something else was stirring, a quiet determination that Rafiq Hassan had just made the biggest mistake of his life. She knew things about him that would make this moment seem like a gentle breeze compared to the storm that was coming. As she cleaned up the mess with trembling hands, her mind was already working, calculating how to turn this public humiliation into the very weapon that would bring down his carefully constructed empire. The party continued around her. Qadri had just found her story's opening scene, the investigation 3 weeks earlier. Amira had sat across from Zara Malik in a cramped coffee shop in Sadr, the veteran journalist's weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of chai. Zara's gray hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her sharp eyes studied the younger woman with the intensity that had made her one of Pakistan's most respected investigative reporters. "You're sure about this?" Zara asked, sliding a manila folder across the sticky table. Going undercover at Hassan's events isn't just dangerous, it's career suicide. If you get caught without solid evidence. Amira opened the folder, revealing photographs of labor camps, financial documents, and testimonials from workers who had been promised jobs through Rafiq's Digital Dreams Foundation. The reality was far different from the glossy brochures. Workers were being paid a fraction of promised wages, living in substandard conditions, while millions of dollars meant for job training programs were being funneled into Rafiq's personal accounts. "My cousin Billa was one of the workers who got trapped in their fake training program," Amira said quietly. 6 months of promises, living in a hostel with 20 other men, learning outdated computer skills that led nowhere. When he complained, they threatened to have him blacklisted from other companies. Zara nodded grimly. Hassan's been perfecting this scheme for 3 years. Takes government grants for job creation, pockets most of the money, gives workers just enough training to look legitimate on paper, then abandons them. Meanwhile, he's hailed as a hero for uplifting Pakistan's youth. Getting the catering job had taken 2 weeks of preparation. Amira had to create a believable background, complete with references from other catering companies that Zara's contacts helped fabricate. She practiced carrying trays, memorized wine names, and most importantly, learned to be invisible. Her first week on the job had been frustrating. Rafiq rarely discussed business during public events, and when he did, it was in coded language that meant nothing to outsiders. But Amira was patient, and more importantly, she was smart. The breakthrough came during her second week when she overheard a conversation between Rafiq and his accountant, Nasir Bhatti, in what they thought was an empty corridor. They were discussing moving money through a series of shell companies to avoid taxes on the foundation's income. Make sure the Cayman account shows the full donation amounts, Rafiq had said, unaware that Amira was cleaning glasses behind a nearby pillar. But the actual disbursements to the training centers should never exceed 30%. The beauty of charity work is that people don't ask too many questions, as long as you show them happy faces in the brochures. Amira had recorded every word on her phone, hidden in her apron pocket. Over the following days, she managed to photograph financial documents left carelessly on tables, memorize names and bank account numbers mentioned in conversations, and even befriend some of the workers who had been brought in as success stories. For photo opportunities, the most damning evidence came from Hassan's own laptop. She left unattended during a bathroom break. Amira had 90 seconds to plug in a USB drive that would copy his files. Her hands shook as she watched the progress bar creep forward, knowing that discovery would mean not just losing her story, but potentially facing serious legal consequences. When Rafiq returned, boasting loudly about his latest government contract, Amira was calmly polishing wine glasses 3 tables away. The USB drive in her pocket contained emails detailing exactly how much money was being stolen, which government officials were being bribed to look the other way. It's most shocking of all, a spreadsheet showing that less than 15% of foundation money was actually reaching the workers it was meant to help. You have enough to destroy him, Zara had said when Amira presented her evidence the night before the gala. But you need a platform. Hassan's lawyers will try to bury this story and discredit you before it gains traction. Amira stared at the documents spread across Zara's desk. So what do I do? You wait for the right moment, Zara replied with a knowing smile. Trust me, men like Hassan always give you that moment. They can't help themselves. As champagne dripped from Rafiq's shirt that night, Amira realized that moment had finally arrived. The revelation the next morning, Amira sat in her modest apartment in Gulsanique, editing the video that would change everything. Her laptop screen glowed with footage from the previous night, the humiliating scene playing on repeat as she carefully synchronized it with months of secretly recorded evidence. Zara arrived with breakfast and coffee, settling beside her protege as they crafted what would become the most shared video in Pakistani social media history. Start with his words, Zara advised, watching Amira splice together clips. Let people hear exactly who Rafiq Hassan really is when he thinks no one important is watching. The video opened with Rafiq's cruel laughter echoing over footage of workers in cramped dormitories. His voice, "People like you will never amount to anything," played over images of the fake training certificates and empty computer labs that were supposed to house his revolutionary programs. The contrast was devastating. And now, Amira's calm, measured voice began as narrator. Let me show you what kind of person Rafiq Hassan really is when the cameras aren't rolling for his charity galas. What followed was a masterclass in investigative journalism. Bank statements showing millions diverted from worker programs. Audio recordings of Hassan laughing about stupid poor kids who believe our promises. Government documents proving that 90% of his foundation's success stories were fabricated. The most powerful moment came when Amira appeared on camera herself, still wearing her server's uniform from the night before. My name is Amira Qadri, and yes, I was the clumsy waitress you saw being humiliated last night. But I'm also a journalist, and for 3 months I've been documenting how Hassan has stolen millions from programs meant to help Pakistan's unemployed youth. He was right about one thing: people like me will never amount to anything in his world, because people like me believe in truth. Zara helped her upload the video simultaneously to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at exactly noon on Friday peak social media time. They titled it simply, "The Real Rafiq Hassan, A Digital Dreams Nightmare." The response was immediate and explosive. Within an hour, the video had 10,000 views. Within 3 hours, it was trending on Pakistani Twitter. By evening, major news channels were calling Amira for interviews. International outlets were picking up the story. The comment section became a battleground of public opinion, but the tide was clearly turning against Hassan. Former employees began sharing their own horror stories. Government whistleblowers came forward with additional evidence. Even some of the wealthy guests from the gala posted apologies, admitting they had been too quick to laugh at someone's humiliation. Hassan's initial response was predictably arrogant. His PR team released a statement dismissing Amira as a disgruntled service worker seeking attention and threatening legal action for defamation. But the evidence was too overwhelming, too well documented for his usual tactics to work. By Saturday morning, Hassan's major corporate sponsors were pulling out. TechVision's stock price plummeted as investors fled. The government announced a formal investigation into the Digital Dreams Foundation, freezing its accounts pending a full audit. Hassan made a crucial mistake, Zara explained to a gathering of journalism students who had come to congratulate Amira. He believed his own propaganda. He thought being rich and connected made him untouchable, but he forgot that in the age of social media, truth has a way of finding its audience. The story gained international attention when the BBC picked it up, framing it as a perfect example of how traditional power structures were being challenged by grassroots journalism and social media activism. CNN featured Amira in a segment about young journalists fighting corruption in developing countries. But the most meaningful response came from an unexpected source. On Sunday evening, as Amira was fielding calls from reporters and trying to process the whirlwind her life had become, she received a message from someone named Danny Al-Shah, his cadre. The message read, "I was Rafiq Hassan's business partner until 2 years ago, when I discovered some of the very things you've now exposed. I tried to report him then, but I didn't have your courage or your evidence. Thank you for doing what I couldn't. If you need additional documentation to support your investigation, I have files that might interest you. More importantly, I wanted you to know that there are people in the business community who have been waiting for someone like you to finally tell the truth." As Amira read the message, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months of careful investigation: hope. Not just for her story, but for the possibility that there were others out there who valued integrity over profit, truth over convenience. She typed her response carefully. "Mr. Shah, I would very much like to meet with you. This story isn't over yet." The reckoning Daniil Shah arrived at the small cafe in Defense precisely on time, carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen better days, but had been well cared for. Amira recognized him immediately, not from his business dealings, but from his eyes. They held the same mixture of determination and wariness that she had seen in her own mirror during the months of investigation. "You're braver than I was," were his first words, as he sat across from her. At 32, Daniel had the lean build of someone who spent more time thinking than exercising, and his simple white shirt and dark jeans suggested a man who had deliberately stepped away from the flashy world of tech entrepreneurship. "You tried to stop him 2 years ago," Amira replied, studying his face. "That took courage too." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "I tried to handle it internally first, thought I could reason with him, convince him to actually use the foundation, money for its intended purpose. When that failed, I went to the authorities with what evidence I had. But Hassan's connections run deep, and I was just one disgruntled partner with a handful of suspicious transactions. They buried my complaint." He opened his briefcase, revealing meticulously organized files. "But I never stopped collecting evidence. I knew someday the truth would surface, and when it did, I wanted to be ready to help." The documents Danielle provided were devastating. As Hassan's former partner in TechVision Solutions, he had access to the company's founding agreements early, investor communications, and most importantly, the original proposal for the Digital Dreams Foundation that showed Hassan had planned the fraud from the very beginning. "Look at this," Danielle said, pointing to an email from 3 years ago. Hassan explicitly tells potential investors that the foundation is designed to be a profitable front for tax optimization and public relations enhancement. He never intended to help anyone. But Danielle's most valuable contribution wasn't just documents, it was context. He explained how Hassan had systematically pushed out anyone with ethical concerns from the company, how he had cultivated relationships with corrupt officials, and how the entire operation was designed to exploit both government funding and public goodwill. "Why didn't you go public before?" Emira asked. "Because I'm a coward," Danielle said simply. "I had a comfortable life, a successful company, respect in the community. Speaking out meant losing all of that, and I convinced myself that maybe I was wrong. Maybe things weren't as bad as they seemed. It took your courage to show me what real integrity looks like." Their collaboration proved to be perfectly timed. The government investigation that Emira's video had triggered was moving slowly. Hampered by Hassan's political connections and expensive lawyers, but when Danielle came forward publicly with his evidence and testimony, the case became impossible. To ignore the press conference they held together was broadcast live on every major Pakistani news channel. Danielle, speaking with quiet authority, methodically presented 3 years of financial records, communications, and documented instances of fraud. His credibility as a successful businessman gave weight to accusations that Hassan's team had tried to dismiss as the fantasies of a disgruntled servant. "I helped create this monster," Danielle said, looking directly into the cameras, ignored warning signs because it was profitable to do so. "But Ms. Qadri has shown us that remaining silent in the face of injustice makes us complicit in it. I can't undo my years of cowardice, but I can ensure that the truth finally comes to light." The impact was immediate and severe. International. Investors began pulling out of Hassan's projects. The Securities and Exchange Commission launched a formal investigation into TechVision's finances. Most damaging of all, the Federal Investigation Agency arrested Hassan's accountant, Nasir Bhatti, who quickly agreed to cooperate with authorities in exchange for reduced charges. Hassan's final public appearance was a disaster. Cornered by reporters outside his Karachi office, he lashed out with the same arrogance that had destroyed him at the gala, blaming jealous competitors and corrupt journalists for his troubles. But his words rang hollow now that the evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "The beautiful thing about truth," Zara observed as they watched Hassan's press conference fall apart on live television, "is that it doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be heard by the right people at the right time." Within a week, Hassan was arrested on charges of fraud, tax evasion, and misappropriation of public funds. His assets were frozen, his foundation dissolved, and TechVision Solutions placed under government oversight pending a complete audit. But for Emira, the most meaningful moment came when workers from the fake training programs began reaching out to thank her. These were people whose voices had been silenced, whose dreams had been exploited, and who had been made to feel invisible. "By a system that valued wealth over worth, you gave us our dignity back," one young man wrote to her. "Hassan made us feel ashamed for believing in his promises. But you showed us that the shame belonged to him, not to us," as the legal process moved forward. Emira found herself spending more time with Danielle, reviewing documents and preparing for court testimony. Their partnership had begun as a professional necessity, but something deeper was growing between them, a shared understanding of what it meant to choose difficult truths over comfortable lies. The redemption 6 months after the viral video that changed everything, Emira stood in the offices of Dawn News, adjusting her new press badge with a mixture of pride and disbelief. The investigative journalism department had offered her a permanent position after 3 major publications tried to recruit her. She had chosen Dawn because Zara Malik was joining as a senior consultant and because they promised her the resources to pursue the kind of stories that mattered. Ready for your first day as a real journalist? Zara asked with a knowing smile, appearing beside her desk with a stack of files. I was always a real journalist, Amira replied with newfound confidence. I just needed the right platform to prove it. Her expose of Rafiq Hassan had won 2 national journalism awards and been cited by international media organizations as an example of how social media could amplify investigative reporting. But more importantly to Amira, it had led to real change. The government had recovered over 50 million rupees in stolen funds, which were being redistributed to legitimate job training programs. Hassan himself was serving a 7-year prison sentence, and his case had inspired new oversight requirements for charitable foundations across Pakistan. The success had brought unexpected opportunities, but also unexpected challenges. Media companies wanted to hire her. Publishers wanted her to write a book, and speaking engagements poured in from universities and conferences. But Amira was learning to be selective, choosing platforms that aligned with her values rather than simply chasing fame or money. Her relationship with Daniel had evolved slowly and naturally over the months of court proceedings and collaborative investigations. What started as mutual professional respect had deepened into something neither of them had been looking for, but both desperately needed: a partnership built on shared principles and genuine understanding. You know what I love about you? Daniel had said during one of their evening walks along Clifton Beach, watching the sun set over the Arabian Sea. You never made me feel guilty for my past mistakes, but you also never let me use them as an excuse to avoid doing better. After Hassan's conviction, Daniel had used his technical expertise and business connections to create a nonprofit organization focused on providing genuine job training and placement services for young Pakistanis. Unlike Hassan's fraudulent foundation, Daniel's program operated with complete transparency, publishing detailed financial reports and maintaining an open-door policy for anyone who wanted to verify their work. I spent 2 years being angry at myself for not stopping Hassan sooner, he told Amira as they planned their next investigation together. But working with you taught me that redemption isn't about erasing past mistakes, it's about ensuring they never happen again. Their second major story together exposed a network of fake universities that were selling worthless degrees to desperate students. Their third revealed how several prominent politicians were using charity cricket matches to launder money from illegal sources. Each investigation built on the last, establishing Amira and Daniel as a formidable team in Pakistan's journalism, an accountability landscape. But perhaps their most important work was smaller and less dramatic: the follow-up stories that checked on Hassan's victims, the profiles of legitimate organizations doing good work, and the educational pieces that helped ordinary citizens recognize and report corruption. Real change doesn't happen in viral moments, Amira wrote in her column 6 months later. It happens in the quiet work of building better systems, supporting honest leaders, and refusing to accept that corruption is simply how things work. Every time someone chooses truth over convenience, justice over profit, or courage over comfort, they strike a blow against the forces that want to keep us divided and powerless. The article accompanied a photo of her and Daniel at a job training graduation ceremony, surrounded by 30 young men and women who had just completed a legitimate program that would actually help them find employment. The graduates were holding certificates that meant something, their faces bright with hope that was grounded in reality rather than false promises. As Amira looked at the photo before it went to print, she remembered the humiliation she had felt that night at the gala, standing in champagne-soaked clothes while wealthy people laughed at her misfortune. That woman felt like a different person now, not because external circumstances had changed, but because she had found her voice and learned to use it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Ready for dinner with the new investors? And yes, I've already run background checks on all of them. Amira smiled, gathering her things. She had learned that love, like justice, worked best when it was built on a foundation of truth, transparency, and shared values. Some fairy tales ended with rescued princesses, but the best ones ended with 2 people choosing to rescue each other and then working together to make the world a little more worthy of the dreams they shared. As she walked out of the newsroom, Past the wall, where her awards hung beside those of veteran journalists she had long admired, Mira felt the deep satisfaction that came from knowing she had found not just her career, but her calling. The girl who had once served drinks in silence had become a woman whose words could topple empires built on lies. And this, she knew, was only the beginning.